welcome to the Mindful UK podcast. It's been a while, but I'm back for Black History Month. Happy Black History Month. Today, I have a very special guest who I'm quite honoured to have on here. He's like a walking encyclopedia. So please introduce yourself. Who are you and why are you here?
Yes, my name is Dr. Bola. I'm actually, my profession is actually engineering. I'm an engineer, aerospace engineer. But one of my passions is actually Black history. And my particular focus is trying to discover the scientific, the genetic, and the mythological parts and cosmological parts of our history.
Mm-hmm. So me and Dr. Bola are going to talk today. As you guys know, I was born and bred in London, and a lot of the things I learned in school were just that, you know, Black people were slaves, and it kind of doesn't go further than that. Unless you do your own research, you don't really learn a lot about your history. And Black history is so important, especially for us. It impacts us in our day-to-day lives. So I spoke to Dr. Bola over the phone. We actually met through TikTok because I had a video on TikTok. Go and check it out on the Mindful UK Instagram where I was talking about knife crime in the UK. That's a whole separate conversation. If we started talking about that, we'll just go on a tangent. So we're not going to focus on that right now, as, you know, we're trying to be positive and talk about our history, our positive Black history. So let's just get into it. So tell me, essentially tell me that what I've been told in school is a lie.
Right, good. That's very, very good for you to say that. Actually, what we've been told in school has been a lie. But not only a lie, but they haven't told us the truth. Now, the first thing is, if I said to you that the first kings and queens of this country were Black, what would you say?
Like, my jaw literally dropped.
Okay, fine. Well, I can give you the proof, because if you went to the law court and they asked you to produce evidence, you have to be able to produce evidence. So I've got 3 books that I've got here. Now, the first book that I have here is called the Memoirs of the Secret Services of John Mackey. Now, John Mackey was a secret agent working for England, and basically the Secret Service was first started by Queen Elizabeth.
Well, and just to confirm, he is a Black man.
He is a Black man. He's the first. Do you remember when they were saying they were going to use Idris Elba as the next James Bond?
Yeah.
Well, the James Bond has been Black in the past. It wasn't called MI6. It was actually called Secret Services. There are documents to prove that, documents from the actual House of Commons documents. You can check these online. Well, this book was compiled in 1723. And in 1723, it mentions various people. It mentions kings, queens. It mentions duchess, dukes. It mentions lords, ladies. It mentions also treasurer, exchequer, chancellor, etc. It also mentions it for both Scotland and Ireland and England. Because when you talk about Wales, Scotland, England, and Ireland, these are all the people of England. But up until 1746, this country was basically Black.
So why do you think this has all been erased?
Well, the reason why it's been erased is, I wouldn't say erased, what I said is left out, is because it invalidates the power and the position that some people hold at this very point in time. If you were to question where they come from or question what they're about, and there's no basis for them to bring it. And if the natural people can bring out their history and say, well, this is our history and this is what it says, then this is a powerful thing.
So money kind of comes into it in a way, because if it's then proven that this is our land, then that creates a whole, conflict, doesn't it?
It does. It does, because they're actually it's not only conflict. Conflict comes when people reject something based on an emotional response. But a logical way of looking at things doesn't, because logic is based on a sequence of events, causes, evidence. It could be email, it could be books, like this one here that I'm showing you right here. It could also be, apart from that, it could be letters, okay? Now, we know, for instance, for the first part of this whole basis is that they're releasing this history a little bit. but they're not doing us justice. For instance, there was a movie recently, or there was a kind of like an episode they did on TV with Jodie. It was Anne Boleyn, where she played a queen, a black queen, and was actually the wife of Henry VIII. But what they don't tell you was that Henry VIII was actually black.
Wow.
Yes,
Wow.
and he was the father of Queen Elizabeth. Now, in this book, I've managed to compile a few evidences.
So, guys, you know, these are, you're hearing these claims, right? And one thing I had to make sure, and as having this podcast, is that Dr. Bola is saying everything truthfully. And having spoken to him and looked up everything he's saying is true, and everything he's saying is very detailed. And if you are skeptical, you need to then do your own research. Everything he's saying, go and look it up yourselves. And this is, explain what this is you have in your hand here.
Yes. What I have in my hand is the book called...
No, I mean...
yes. So what I have in my hand is basically, because the book will be too much to read and because of the sense of time, I've compiled a list. And the list is just a genealogical list in chronological order. So Queen Elizabeth I, which I just mentioned, who was the daughter of Henry VII, was the daughter of Henry VIII, Henry VIII. Now, she was black, and then she was the mother of James I, who is also called James VI, and James I is the father of Charles I. Now, Charles I was beheaded during the Civil War in England in 1625. 1640 it started, it finished in 1660. Now, Charles I is the father of Charles II and James II. Now, I need to pause there a little, because right now we have a king who is Charles III, but he's actually from Salzburg-Königsberg, which is Germany. They changed their names to Windsor in 1917 because of what was happening to the Romanovs in Russia. So they didn't want any kind of violent upheaval that may end up with them being murdered. So they changed themselves from Salzburg-Königsberg to actually what you call Windsor. Now, Windsor is a castle. They just gave them name to a
they
castle.
just took the castle.
Yes, but when you actually look at these names I'm talking about, this is the Stuart family. Now, the Stuart family, the word Stuart comes from the word Swati. It's German, it's Saxon in origin. So Swati, which means black. Swati means black. Swati, S-W-A-R-T-H-Y. Swati, which means black. And so Stuart is the word. Then you have Edward, because they relate all the way, they trace their genealogy all the way from Edward III, who was also the father and the great-grandfather of Richard II. Okay? And Richard II, by the way, was black.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to get into.
Yes.
I wanted to understand how we know that Henry VIII is black. And then also, we were speaking on the phone. So we spoke on the phone a couple of days ago, and Dr. Bola actually mentioned Richard II.
Yes.
And I looked him up, and it's insane when you look at the painting, because a lot of the people you're talking about, the paintings of them, they are white people.
Yes.
Whereas the painting of Richard II, he actually is a black man. He's got dark skin.
Right. Now, this is important to understand, okay? Now, in the laws of England, there's a book called The Laws of England. There are 4 versions of it. There are 4 volumes. One is the law as relate to persons. One is the law relate to things. Then one, public wrongs and private wrongs. Now, this is the original law of England. Now, in that law of England, it says that the crown and the throne is hereditary, meaning that it's based from father to sons and so on, or to the wife or to the mother, which means the queen, if the husband dies. Now, we need to understand that this hereditary is based on sexual hereditary, meaning there can be no clones, there can be no kind of wishy-washy thing, because then it disables that lineage. The lineage must be continuous. It's the same as the kings and queens that were in Africa. Now, we need to understand, like I was saying before, Queen Elizabeth I was the mother of James I, and then James I was the father of Charles I, and then Charles I had 2 sons, Charles II and James II. Now, Charles II who was actually restored after the Civil War in 1660, was restored to the throne of his father, okay, after his father was beheaded. Now, he now had sons. Now, he had a son called Charles Lennox. He was 30 years of age. He was black complexion, and he was the Duke of Richmond. His mother was the Duchess of Portsmouth. So his mother being the Duchess of Portsmouth, you can see that his mother has to be black if he was black, because this is genetics we're talking about, okay? Then we also have another son that he had, which was George Fitzroy. And George Fitzroy was a tall black man, 40 years of age, and he was the Duke of Northumberland. And his mother was the Duchess of Cleveland. Now, then he had another son, and this other son was called Charles, and he was 30 years, and he was the Duke of St. Alban, and his mother was Mrs. Gwynn. So you have Duchess of Portsmouth, Duchess of Cleveland, Mrs. Gwynn, and then we now have a great-great-grandson, which was Charles Fitzroy, and he was 25 years of age, and he was a tall black man. Now, if anybody has watched a movie called The Favorite, they will realize that movie in The Favorite, when they were showing the extra, they showed a man breakdancing, sort of. What they're trying to show is that movie is based around Charles II, because Charles II had 3 women he was with. He was with the Duchess of Portsmouth, the Duchess of Cleveland, and Mrs. Gwynn. So he had 3 sons from there, and all 3 sons were black. Now, if the father's black, the mother's black, that means that the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother is black. Now,
wait, so the question I have is,
yes,
why do we not know this? What has caused us to now believe they are white?
Right. Now, what happened is this. There was an event that happened. Remember, we're talking about this book was compiled in 1723. Apparently, there was a war that took place in 1745. But the war was actually begun in 1689 up until 1746, because James II, who was the brother of Charles II, took over the throne after his brother died. Now, because he was next in line, what happened was there was a situation that happened, okay, and he lost his throne. He was in exile. Now, when he was in exile, there was the invasion of England took place. Okay, now there was wars that took place, and there were so many battles. There were about 9 battles that took place, and people in Scotland, people in Ireland were fighting, including people in fighting the English army. Now, these events were all based on the First Civil War. So some of the people in the First Civil War that weren't beheaded lived on to cause this situation. So you have 2 people. You have the Whigs, and then you have the people that call the Tories. Now, the Whigs wanted the country to become a republic, but the Tories wanted to keep the crown. They wanted to keep the monarchy. So what happened was this war took place, and when this war was fought, there were some soldiers that were brought from abroad, and those soldiers apparently were white. So when they came, they defeated our army here, and when they defeated it, what happened was they now took a lot of the elders, executed a lot of the elders. After killing off the elders, they took the children and all the young people and all of them, and they deported them. They put some of them in Montserrat. They put some of them in Leeward Islands, Nova Scotia, Antigua, Barbados, Jamaica. There's another country as well which they put them, Montserrat, did I mention that? Martinique. Okay, they put them in Martinique. They scattered them all over these islands. Okay, now this is part of a military tactic. The military tactic is this: if you kill the eldership, then all you have left is just the children. You scatter those people, then when they have children, there is no oral history. So the line is broken. So now we have fictional events or fictional characters and whitewashing that was now done to cover up all these. Now, the book that highlights this is this book here. And this book here is titled The Jacobite Gleanings from State Manuscripts, Short Sketches of Jacobite Transportations in 1745. It's a book by J. Macbeth Forbes. You can actually get it. So the first one is 1723. This one is 1746. Now, you know, they say there's a scripture in the Bible that says that out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, a fact is established. Remember that James the First was the person who authored the Bible. The Bible was written here by black people, both in there were 47 writers from the University of Cambridge and Oxford. There's a list of them in the Bible. If we have a next episode, I probably can show it. Now, in 1756, this book here that I have is called the Virginia Colonial Soldiers. James the First, in 1603, started the colonies that are in America. And there are 13 colonies: South Carolina, North Carolina. North Carolina, South Carolina. That word Caroline is related to the Carolinian lineage, which is belonging to Charles the First and all the Stuart family. Now, all these 13 colonies, they're all registered under the Washington District of Columbia. So the actual artificial person or the corporation was started by James the First. So you see, this history is not only important just to know and have what we call our self-identity, it's also important to understand the power and all the rights and the privileges that are afforded to us as our birthright. Now, so I've got 3 books, like I said before.
So guys, have a look at these books.
So I'm putting them up. The first one is John Mackey, Memoirs of John Mackey. Look at that, Secret Services, John Mackey, okay? And you'll probably get that from our lovely lady here is doing the invigilation, the host. The second book is the J. Macbeth Fords, which is short sketches of the transportations. This is the deportations in 1746. And this one here is the Virginia Colonial Soldiers. This gives you all the people that were in America. A majority of them were black, swarthy, brown. Okay, a lot of people don't want to be black these days, but all these words, black, brown, are all used in these books. So there's nothing wrong with the word black, because most people say, oh, black means bad, black means lack. No, black is good, black is powerful, black is scientific, black is the black mother. You can't be a knight if you're not black. The Dark Knight, you know, the Dark Knight, when they did in that movie, The Dark Knight Batman, he was wearing black, because the knights were originally black. You see, we have a rich culture in this country. We have not only the knights, we have the druids, we also have the cathedrals, the churches, all the big buildings, the parliament, all the parliament and everything, all of this is ours. We built this. We built this country.
Can we quickly go back to the Cheddar Man? I remember you mentioning the Cheddar Man, and that's one thing. It went ding, ding, ding in my head, because I remember that's the only like black history that I've actually seen on the news and been like, wow, they're actually admitting that black people were in the UK. In the early stages, years and years ago.
Wonderful. I'm glad you asked that question. Now, the thing about Cheddar Man is very important. They said Cheddar Man was discovered here in Britain from his hair and some bone particles, and they were able to do a DNA test, and then forensic DNA, they were able to identify him as being black with blue eyes, okay, with blue eyes. Now, you need to understand this. This was 10,000 years ago.
And do you know what, touching on that as well, have you seen there's so many black people who go viral, black people with blue eyes in Africa, in the US as well, and it's very, very common. Okay,
now the thing about genes are very important. They have dominant genes and recessive genes. A recessive gene does not show up. Say, for instance, your trait of your brown eyes, your hair, the color of your eyes, your shape, they're all encoded in your genes. You inherit one from your mother, one chromosome from your mother, one chromosome from your father during the opportunity of sexual relations. But you also inherit what is called mitochondrial DNA from your mother and from your father. These are your ancestral DNA. So you have one from your mother and your father, and then you have the mitochondrial DNA. Well, what happens was when the child is beginning in the fetus and going through the meiosis, the division of the cells, there's a rapid explosion and a multiplication of those chromosomes. So all those genes as a child grows are now in every part of the body. But the recessive gene that may show up as blue eyes will not show up, but it'll be there. The dominant one will be brown eyes or black eyes. But the recessive gene could be blue eyes. But not only that, red hair. You see? Now, albinos, okay, albinos are natural black people because it's a genetic malfunction of the gene that controls melanin. So what happens is, if you look at their eyes shaky, and their hair is also nappy as well, curly. Okay, so this is how you know that this information is carried in our genes. And I actually studied genetics very well. So I can actually do a test and genes. I can draw blood and tell you how many chromosomes we have, because our chromosomes, our genes, is very, very different from white people's genes. So this is how they were able to identify that Cheddar Man was actually black.
That's actually very, very interesting. So during Cheddar Man's time,
Yes.
Do you have any kind of idea of what his life might have been like, what kind of empire he was a part of? Because I know the Romans were there.
Wow, this is a powerful thing you just mentioned, okay? Now, when you say 10,000 years ago, you're talking about Atlantis, because Atlantis was destroyed by a flood in 9,000 after 9,000 years. So we're talking about Atlantis. We're talking about the Pyramid Age. That's the Great Age, okay? The Pyramid Age. So if we're talking about his lifestyle, we have to understand something. Those people back then were giants. This is one thing we need to understand. Now, somebody will say, what do you mean giants? Well, if you go to the Houses of Parliament today and you're actually able to go in, you will notice that the roofs are very high. So when you say what kind of lifestyle were they were advanced people. They can never have been cave dwellers. They can never have been nomadic people. They can't have been. No, civilization was here already. Now, the question then is, does that mean that the technology we have nowadays is not new? That it was actually stolen and appropriated and just reverse engineered? The question is, the answer to that question is absolutely yes. Because we have to understand that there's some people right now, you see there's a young boy right now that he has 4 diplomas. And he's viral, 4 diplomas. This young boy knows mathematics, knows everything. How does he know this? Because we're carrying this genetic information within us.
Oh yeah, so can you get into that? What we were talking about before, before we came on camera, genes and going back and how we carry our ancestors' genes on, and architecture.
Right. Now, we have to understand there's something called dominant and recessive genes. Well, there's something called the subconscious. The subconscious is the bridge between the body and the mind. Now, when they say self-image, that self-image is a projection from your subconscious. But the subconscious is relying from information from your soul. And the soul gives this information to the subconscious. But the problem is, if the eyes from the outside are looking and seeing a negative image, and this negative image is very strong, it can be imprinted on the subconscious. And it will then act as a blockage to the brain and the bridge between the subconscious and the body.
Because do you know what it makes you think? It makes you think, imagine if we all knew, every black person in the world knew all of this history. Imagine how powerful we would be in the present day.
I mean, this is we're talking about a powerful renaissance. When I talk about renaissance, and I'm talking about a renaissance that would take us into what we call a quantum leap. A quantum leap of development, a quantum leap of outlook, a quantum leap. I mean, the average Joe Blogs among our people will be making serious inventions.
Do you know what this is reminding me of? Have you watched the movie Get Out?
Right.
It's just like that. You know the inference behind that? It's actually insane. Like when you strip us from our abilities, how we can become. Whereas if we had those abilities, we could become so powerful. But it's like we're stuck at a line where, not even a line, like a wall that we can't get past due to that.
That is where we talk about a quantum leap. You see, this is why this knowledge is important, because the knowledge of self is very important. You see, your self-image, how you see yourself, it actually dictates how you behave. Well, the subconscious controls the conscious mind. So if the conscious mind is trying to tap into its genetic blood bank and it's had a blockage, which is some kind of memory that has been imprinted from outside, then what happens is you don't have that person exploiting, what I say is exploring their full potential. For instance, the power of a seed to grow into a tree is in the seed. So the power to become who we really are it was in the sperm that gave birth and the egg that gave birth to us. So if we're carrying those genetic material, we should be able to tap into it. But the problem is we are not relating to the knowledge, the physical, mental knowledge that can then help us to reinforce that bridge between the subconscious and the body.
That is actually really interesting. It reminds me of what we were talking about the other day on the phone about the tree and the tree trunk and how our past really does impact our present. Can you explain that?
Right, great. Now, this is wonderful. When you look at a tree's roots are deep in underground, okay? Then you have the stem, then you have the branches, okay? Now, the thing about trees is trees are exactly like us. Do you know why the trees are exactly like us? Well, if you cut a tree, you have what they call tree rings. The tree rings is the actual date when the tree was here. Well, in the chromosomes, we also have what is called clock genes. The clock genes can actually tell us when and how long we've been on this planet. You see, because when genes divide, they leave traces. And those traces are then filled up with a cap called telomerase. Telomerase then stops the gene from losing its integrity. But when they look at those genes, they find out, wait a second, if you count how many times it's divided, then you can count how long you've been on this planet. So we could say we're carrying the biological genetic material of the Egyptians from the first civilization centuries ago. We're talking millennia ago. But like I said before, if you don't tap into it, okay, give you an example. The branches, okay, the tree gets its power from the roots. It draws sunlight through its mitochondria, which is chloroplast, okay, and its chlorophyll, which is like our blood, okay. It draws the sunlight energy in, and we have melanocytes that help the melanin to draw vitamin D and all protection from the sun, and then it taps into the ground and gets all the nutrients, the water and everything in order to grow stronger. Well, if you cut a tree or block a tree by just tying it and putting something in it, some of the branches will begin to wither, okay? And that shows you the similarities. If there's a blockage, then we begin to wither, not physically, but we begin to wither in a spiritual sense of the word. We begin to wither in a psychological sense of the word. We begin to not show who we truly are. For instance, there's something to do with this black and black crime, where black people are, you know, hurting each other. But, well, if you actually understand this history from your younger teens, and you now realize, wait a second, I'm a king and a king. Royalty don't do that to each other. Royalty honor each other. Royalty sees him as... Back in the day, we had words like Your Highness, my Lord, my King, Your Majesty, you know. But now, we don't say those words. We say other words that are shocking to hear. But the history that we're looking at here says that this is what we are. So when we watch the Parliament and we watch the House of Lords, when we watch the House of Commons and we watch the kings and all these people talking, just imagine how it was when black people were there. Imagine how it was when the Duke of Marlborough was there. He was black. The Chancellor was there. I'm talking about Edward Hyde when he was there. Just look at it, all these people. Or Philip Schofield, not Philip Schofield. One of the foreign ministers. They were all black. So imagine how it would have looked like. And that should give you pride. But you can't discover it if you don't study it. And you can't study it if you don't find it. Because they've hidden it.
Exactly.
They've hidden it.
That's what I find so irritating, like the fact that it's hidden. And
it's hidden, yes.
Why is it hidden? You know what I mean?
Okay, now let me also say something about why it's hidden. Now, you see, the way to get power over a people is to cut them off from their past. And then what you then do is put in another thing in its place. So now you create a different self-image. Now, they've done this kind of experiment with mice. And now mice actually share the genetic material with the same as us. Now, they found that if they kill off the parents of the mice, they found that some of the mice begin to die. But some of the mice are able to survive only because they're able to tap in. But they haven't been able to attribute it. They call it epigenetics. Epigenetics is when information from your previous parent has been passed down. For instance, some people have a phobia for water. Some people have a phobia for dark places. Some people have a phobia for spiders. Some people have a phobia for rats. but they don't know where these phobias come from. Well, these are epigenetics. Now, do you know that the majority of the black people that were taken were not slaves? They were actually indentured servants.
Yeah. I was watching Black and British on BBC iPlayer. Guys, go and watch that. It's really, really good. And there was a lot I was finding out about the people who were actually slaves and about Africa before the slave trade even happened. And it was insane to see, like, it's not a myth when you mention kings and queens. It's genuinely not. But a lot of us are made to believe that because of the way we're educated in English schools, and because African countries were colonized as well. It's like that same history we're taught here.
Right. We need to understand that there's prime ministers and there's presidents. When did these prime ministers and presidents started showing up? Now, what happened to the monarchs? What happened? Now, there's a difference between the monarch and the people. The monarch and the people are related by contract. They fight the wars and support the contract. They obey his laws. So there's a mutual agreement. So they can't rise up against their sovereign, and their sovereign can do them no wrong. Now, they share the same sovereignty, which is part of the soul. The soul is free, which is where the word Freemason comes from, which is where the word freedom comes from. You see, there's a book called Doomsday Book. But this is another part we should leave out. But what we need to understand is those people that were taken as slaves were prisoners of war. Now, we need to understand, even the Romans were doing it. The Romans, Romans were black, this is what they would do. When they wanted to go into a country, the first thing they would do is they would identify the people who are malcontents. Then they will find out the royals, and they put them against each other. Then they will attack from outside. Then when they attack from outside, they can easily capture the family, dispose of them, and then they put the people that malcontents and then put them in power. Now, this is the same thing that is being done now in Africa right now. They take all the leaders that are true leaders, they kill them off, and then they take all these so-called presidents and put them in power, decoys. Okay, but they're all agents of the state. Well, all those people were prisoners of war. Now, all the people that I'm talking about, the people in Wales, the people in Scotland, the people in Ireland that were all black, and England, they were shipped out into all these islands, including America. And when they were shipped out, they were now put into indentured servitude, but they were not paid. So remember, the indentured servitude. When they die, their children are still working. So obviously somebody can come and say, you're a slave. And they will just take it.
And they also, I couldn't believe it, they actually had a law that permitted the murder of slaves. Like anyone who's a slave. You can kill a slave and not.
Now, this is one thing I have to say about this generation. If white people and all the generation want to do reparations to black people, they want to repair their damage, because there's some good white people that want to do that. If they want to do that, they must come to grips with the truth. Then they must come to the grip to say, okay, how can we repair this damage that we have done? Because they are benefiting from our history. Now,
let's pause that there. Because that's a very interesting topic to end this on. This is only episode 1, and we do have episode 2 coming out very, very soon. But I hope this episode gives you guys a moment to reflect and genuinely think about what we're talking about. Look at the books that Dr. Bola has mentioned. I will link them in the bio below. And get ready for episode 2, because we're just going to get deeper. But I think that's the perfect cliffhanger to kind of end it on. Let's end it on a cliffhanger. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Check out part 2, guys, coming out soon. And this is Mindful UK. Thank you.